everyone, and welcome back to our next episode of Chatting with Air Bubbles. And tonight I have another, or today, whatever time it is, I have another wonderful guest with me and a dear friend of mine, Miss Tayo. So first, why don't you let everybody know a little bit about yourself, the thing that I failed to do the first time. So let's hear it. Where can we find you? Who are you? How long have you been cosplaying? All those wonderful questions.
All right, so my name is Miss Tayo. I have been cosplaying for about almost 5 years, and I've been sewing for over 20 years now. I mostly spend time on Instagram. That's usually where you can see me posting regularly. I do have a Facebook page, but I'm not on there very much. So the best way to find me is Instagram. I Let's see, is that everything? I don't know. I love to make big fluffy ball gowns, and we're here today because we're going to talk about my favorite thing, which is cosplaying on a budget.
Which I am very bad at, I won't lie. So that's why we're talking. I'm also going to learn some things. But I have to ask the question because I've been asking everyone this. What is your favorite cosplay you've created?
This is It's so hard because I love them all so much. I think Winifred Sanderson is one of my favorites because she was my first, and like brought me into the community. So that's definitely a big favorite. And a runner-up is Princess R2D2. She's so cute, and I love that costume.
It's great because right when you said that, it came up on the slideshow. So
Oh,
it was like perfect timing. Yeah. So, I think cosplay is expensive only because I'm terrible at budgeting. Sometimes I do it well. Yeah. But I think a misconception that people have when they first come into cosplay or first hear about cosplay is that it's expensive. Like I hear people all the time, they're like, "Oh, I don't want to work with Warbler because it's expensive." And it can be, but like it also can't be. Like it just depends on how you get your resources and all these things. So I want to start first, like hearing a little more about you because I know we competed together at Emerald City a few years ago, and you actually placed first in the sewing category with your Winifred Sanderson costume. And I know you said it was made in under $100, and that's crazy.
yes.
A winning
Yes.
costume that costs under $100.
And Winifred is just one of two of my cosplays that have won costume contests under $100. So you can
That's
you can do it
crazy.
on a budget.
So can you break down a little bit then, like how like you made those? Like you could pick one or the other if you want, but because I think people
Yeah.
when they see like an award-winning costume, they assume it costs a lot of money, and I want people to know that that's not necessarily true. So like, how did you budget, break it down? Like it looks like it came out of the movie.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. I think that one of the biggest things about endeavoring to make a budget cosplay is giving yourself time. I think that time is one of the most important factors because when you're not in a rush, you'll be surprised at how much time you can spend waiting for the deal or the cheapest sale of the year and so on and so forth. So and sometimes it's just you find the perfect thing at the right price and you get it for the future because I'm one of those people who has a stash. So I think that that's definitely something that comes into play. When it comes to budget. That's not necessarily true all the time. I think you can do budget cosplay all the time year round, but that is something like, for example, my Princess Belle ball gown was made with gold curtains that I got from Value Village for $36. I bought them 2 years before I made the costume. Like it just because you can't pass up that kind of yardage at that price. So, I think that the biggest thing about budget cosplay is time. Give yourself like twice as much time as you think it's going to take because sometimes acquiring those things just it will take a little bit of time to make that happen. Um, for Winifred, obviously one of the biggest piece is the jacket. It is made of a green velvet, and that those big sleeves and all that skirt is a lot of yardage that you need to accommodate for. So I got that velvet on clearance at Joann's. It's their cheap stretch knit velvet, and I got it on a Fourth of July sale for $2.14 a yard. And to make it look a little richer than it was, I used seam tape, like seam stabilizer, which is 100% rayon. It's pretty inexpensive. I actually got a whole roll of it at Value Village for $1. So that's how I was able to make that kind of work. And even the lining fabric, it didn't really matter what color it was to me. I was like, just something neutral, like a gray or a green would be fine. And I got it for, again, like $2 a yard with a coupon. And so you can really make your coupons stretch, make those Value Village and Goodwill and thrift store, those dollars will stretch more at places like that sometimes, and keep that coupon game strong.
Yes.
Some of the other things that were budget on that costume was that wig was really cheap, and I learned how to style it so that I could make it look not quite so cheap. I got shoes to modify free from a neighbor because I'm on a buy nothing group. There were just a lot of little things that I really kept track of with that. Even things like the fake teeth. I did buy those. They're like fake teeth you can buy, but they were like $13. So they were a big budget item.
If that's the biggest budget item, that's just crazy.
Right? It's not so bad. So I think some of it is identifying the most expensive aspect of a costume, or your perceived most expensive aspect. And for me, a lot of the time that's fabric. And then search for that in a more budget friendly manner. And then just one more example, Princess R2, that whole dress is made with a bolt of fabric I got from Recreative, which is a local reuse store in my area. And it was $8 for the whole bolt. And I actually used it to make both Princess R2 and Rose Quartz. That's the same fabric. And it's sometimes you find those steals and you get the bang for your buck.
Well, I know I bought that bolt of green fabric from the opera, and I don't know how often like operas and theaters like cull out their fabric, but I mean it could be something to look out for.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I guess that's definitely something else to keep in mind, is that I do work in an industry where fabric is being gotten rid of. Like I work in theater. That's something that I do for my job, is eliminate the scrap fabric. And so sometimes things that I'm like, ooh, that's useful, I like take it home with me, or when it's being sent to Goodwill or Thread Cycle, I will go through that bag before it goes. And you never know. I've also acquired a lot of fabric from my friends' grandparents or sewists I knew who have since passed, and their children will call me and say, hey, she knew you and she'd want you to have these things. And so I end up there and go, whoa, like it's really amazing how generous the sewing community is, especially when people start to retire. So I always think about that community, that part of the community as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. I need to learn to budget better.
I also love a spreadsheet. I can't lie. I love a good spreadsheet.
I'm learning to love that. I definitely recommend that to everyone getting into cosplay. There's an app, I have forgotten what it's called, but you can track like progress on how much things cost, what you need, down to like the yardage and the progress. Like I highly recommend that as a practice to get into immediately, because if you do want to take this hobby words are hard, hobby to a professional level, you need to know how much time you're spending on things. It is very important.
And that's always something to keep in mind too. When I talk about budget cosplay, I am not budgeting my time in there.
Yes.
It's my time, but when I'm doing something fun, like creating a costume that I really love, like that's part of the fun, right? So if I can do it for myself with a slightly lower budget, I think it's worth a try.
Yeah. I would probably technically be in the negative of costumes I've made, but the fun factor and how
it's up here,
it's way higher. But I also like to make things for longevity, which you can totally also do on a budget. Just so you know, as a person who makes armor, definitely save all your Warbler scraps, even foam scraps. Very useful for later things.
I've used a lot of Warbless scraps because it is just so useful for little tiny bits and bobs that I don't want to buy or find. I'll just make them out of little
Yeah.
Warbler and foam, and it craft foam, so cheap, so useful.
So this is a great like leeway into sort of our like final little question here about like tips and tricks for budgeting. We talked about spreadsheets, saving scraps. Do you have any other tips and tricks? Coupons. Oh my gosh, yes, coupons. Never go into Joann's or Michael's without a coupon.
No, never. Don't do it. There's so many ways to get coupons. Just use the coupons.
But are there things you kind of like keep in your back pocket that you don't think people necessarily think about when they're budgeting on a costume? Like,
yeah, I think that I will say some of the things that you should never use secondhand. Number one, thread. Never ever buy new thread. Thread is a fairly inexpensive thing. You should have new thread for your project because over time it does weaken. So that is something I'll never say. Yeah, use that thread, that box of thread your aunt gave you 15 years ago. Don't do that. I do a lot of tricky things to fabric. I will dye fabric, so sometimes I look for natural fibers over polyester. I know you can dye both. I just prefer natural fibers. For things like mock-ups, I save things like I just upgraded from a full-size bed to a queen-size bed, so I use all my sheets from my full-size bed for mock-up fabric now. That's a fun back pocket thing. You don't always have to buy muslin. It can be anything. In fact, it's better if it's something closer to what you're making. So if you're making something really lightweight, maybe check the sale fabric at Value Village or a curtain and see if there's something that's a little lighter weight for you to try and make that mock-up out of. I think that's really useful. I try and stay away from anything labeled for an event, like bridal or cosplay, because they like to kind of jack up the prices, and if you can steer clear of those things, sometimes you can save a buck, because sometimes they'll have a similar material elsewhere that's not labeled a certain way. I think looking online is always a good idea. If you're doing something in bulk, don't hesitate to look at buying a full bolt of a material, because that is very useful. But yeah, I think those are pretty helpful tricks as well. And then I mean, I wouldn't want to say save things, but I do kind of want to say save stuff, because I think that there are certain things like, a piece of trim this big could go right across the top of a corset, to make it a little fancier, or like you can find uses for smaller things. So, keep it chill, but like it doesn't hurt to save something if it's special.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about how I reorganized all my drawers, and I was like, oh yeah, just get like, there's like little boxes you can buy at like the dollar store or like the dollar section in Michael's, and I have so many of them, and they stack on each other, and they just fit all sorts of stuff in them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And you never know. Like, there might be a little notion that you're like, I'm never going to need that D-ring. But, like, you're throwing the purse away anyway. Just take it.
Yeah. It's a great tip. I love saving things, but maybe, like, cull through them every so often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just in case. But, all right. So we are nearing our time. I don't know why I'm having a hard time with words, but I want to make sure we had a little bit of time for you to remind everyone where to find you in case they have questions or want some more of those tips and tricks. I know we did a Cosplay 101 panel as well a while back, which you can find on my YouTube channel, which I don't really update, but it's there if you want to watch it. And also pre-recorded during PAX Online. So where can we find you?
You can find me at Miss Tayo on Instagram. I'm working on a Princess Buttercup cosplay right now, so the progress on that is pretty fun. And yeah, so come find me there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you take all these tips and tricks. Halloween is close, so maybe you can go get some bed sheets and throw something together really quick. You never know. So we'll see you next time, hopefully. So thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.